progress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our our special council meeting today, Wednesday, August 27th, 2025. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm going to pass it to Clementine for a roll call and share announcements with the public.
Councilmember Barber.
Present.
Councilmember Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Rash.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
And Mayor Williamson.
Here.
And public comment and participation information is provided on this meeting's agenda, which is online at monterey.gov/agendas. In-person attendees, please keep your electronic devices muted to prevent audio interference with our meeting. And thank you for participating in your city government.
Thank you, Clementine. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask Councilmember Smith to kick us off here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ed. All right, and with that, we're going to our one public appearance item that brings us here today. Item 1 on the agenda is to receive presentation on potential strategies to reduce the city's $10 million structural annual budget deficit. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Hans for staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm here to kick off the presentation today. As you all know, we passed in June this year the single largest budget in the Monterey's history of around $110 million. But we also passed the note that the $110 million in general fund revenues is being outpaced by our expenses of $120 million at a tune of $10 million. So we have a structural deficit, or a deficit between income and expenses of around $10 million. This fiscal year, we were able to balance the budget using a variety of tools that we presented to the City Council and ultimately got it approved. But today, we also shared with you that today we would talk to you about how are we going to bridge this gap of $10 million. Why do we have a $10 million deficit? One might ask. Well, part of that are a lot of costs that are outside of the control of the city. The largest chunk of salaries that we have in this, the largest chunk of our expenses are personnel cost. You cannot have AI roll out to a police call, or you cannot have AI fix a fire or extinguish a fire. A lot of the tasks that we are doing day in, day out are done by personnel. But also we have costs that are increasing and that are outside of our city's control. And as an example, the city's liability and property insurance premiums raised between 2020 and 2020 by $3.2 million. That's 375% more that we have to pay for liability and property insurance. And frankly, our revenues, that basically the money that we are taking in, are not keeping up with the cost that we have to pay for services and for insurance premiums and so many more. So today we want to talk about how can we address the $10 million structural deficit. For this fiscal year, again, we were able to balance it with one-time solutions, but that is not sustainable. We need to put something in place that is sustainable over the next few years. And we can do it by increased ongoing revenues. We can also do it by reducing ongoing expenditures. And so today we have prepared a presentation as well as a few assignments to the council as well as to the community. And we hope to bring this all back on September 2nd. But without further ado, I have asked our finance director to interest us with a few charts and slides and some costs, some number overviews that will highlight where we are and where we can go if we do nothing, or where we will go if we do something. So with that, Rafaela.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Good afternoon, council and citizens. So Hans just said everything I was going to say for my first slide, so we'll skip back, move on to, except for I just want to actually really talk about real quickly what a structural deficit is. Like every year we struggle to make the revenues and the expenditures kind of balance out. And so 100 million, a million here, a million there is not a huge difference. With our $200 million budget, it's not, we can pretty much kind of move stuff around, shift things, and we can actually absorb that. $10 million was a lot different in absorbing that, and especially with structural meaning that it is an ongoing expense. It's an ongoing difference. It's not just this one year, not just something happened this year. This is next year is going to be the same. The following year, it'll be the same, or maybe slightly go up based on CPI and based on other increases to things. So we just want to really make sure that everybody understands that it's not a one-time deficit. It is a structural, meaning that this is ongoing. And so we need to put some things in place to kind of fix this problem. So again, like Hans said, we did do a lot of temporary one-time things this year to actually plug that 10 million. Like we reduced the amount for 2024 and 2025 that we put into the reserves, with the exception of economic uncertainty. We left that the same, so that is still maintained at 20%. We increased, we took out 7% of O&M across the board. We we chilled some positions, and we call them chilled as opposed to frozen, so that we had the opportunity to kind of move some things around if attrition came or something came up where we can kind of move some things around. We increased the percentage of salary savings that we use to kind of to bridge that gap, because we know that we always have some vacancies, and we account for that. So we did, those are some of the things that we actually did for that. So I want to move on to the next slide. So just to kind of show you where we've come. So I've done a 10-year kind of a real top tier analysis, starting with the FTEs. So if you look at the chart where we have from fiscal year 2015 through 2026, this current fiscal year, our FTEs have basically gone back up. So our FTEs are higher than they were before COVID. If you see that dip in the middle, that was the COVID years when there were layoffs, and as you can see, we've ramped up the FTEs. So we've gone from a higher number down to less than 420, back up to 488 this fiscal year. Also want to say that another reason is like our current labor contracts, they were negotiated and based on FTEs in FY24 of 450 personnel. So when we look at what are some of the reasons, we've got 30 more positions out there than when we negotiated the 3-year contract. So that's also in something that helps to increase our expenditures that was not anticipated. And for FY 25-26, we adopted 482. And then since then, we've added 6 new firefighters for the paramedic program. So there's things that are continually adding to the bottom line. So these are some of the things that are happening. Next slide, please. And so this chart is our revenues versus expenses if we do nothing. So first of all, if you look at the blue line, that's our acts from FY25 through FY15, 2015 through 25. Those are actual numbers. The rest of the numbers moving from 26 through 31, those are our projected numbers. And if you kind of look at the line, you can see that for the most part, with the exception of the dip from FY20 and 21, which is basically the COVID years, that the revenue is pretty solid. It's pretty steadily rising. You'll notice a dip in 30 and 31, and that's captured here because that is in case that would include a loss of revenue from Measure G, which is about $6 million a year. We know that we're going to renew, right? Everybody, yes, we're going to renew. But I just wanted to actually show that what this looks like. The expenses that are laid out here, what they do is, again, if we do nothing, so they include no attrition. If we don't do anything, we discontinue the frozen and chill positions that we did this year. If we continue doing COLA salary increases every year after the expiration of our contract, if we continue to do 2.5 million contributions for CIP, if we increase salaries based on FTEs, that number will continue to rise. And if you can see, the spread between the expenses and the revenues continues to grow. So that's the revenues outpacing our expenses outpacing our revenues. Wish it was the other way around, but it's not yet. Next slide. So our projected annual deficit, so doing nothing, that's the green line here. So these are actually these are what the deficit would be. So FY26 would be 14 million as opposed to the 10. It's like if we actually did nothing. And that 14 million in 6 years by FY 2031 would be at 21 million. So if we did we just actually looking at the same moderate adjustments that we did this year. So those moderate things that we did, like the attrition, like the salary savings, those kind of things, the chill, the frozen, those things that we keep in place, just that. And this is not without our strategies that we're working on today. What we see is that the 10 million deficit starts getting better. It goes down every year. But it still takes 6 years to get to the right side. So up to 413,000. But again, we are still not quite at zero, but this is what the projected annual deficit looks like if we only do the moderate level and if we do absolutely nothing. So of course, there's no option to not do anything. So that's why we are here today. Next slide. And then our good news is our reserve policies, reserve funds. So we've put things away. I mean, so if you look at from FY20, we started at about 13 million. That was sitting in our reserve policy for economic uncertainty. We have risen. It's risen because we have continually put money aside to take care of those deferred costs that we have. And so while it looks great, so we're up to like 38 million in all of our general fund reserve account, while it actually looks like a great number. We also want to keep in mind even though we have 38 million here, we still have 170 million worth of unfunded pension liability. We also still have more than $130 million of infrastructure needs. So it's a great start. I don't want anybody to think that, oh yeah, we got, 38 million to layperson is great. Wish I had it in a bank account. But when you're looking at $300 million worth of expenses and liabilities, it's just a start. Next. And so I was asked the question, and so I just wanted to put it in kind of a chart form. What if we decided to basically start spending the economic uncertainty fund? We have that 38 million, and actually just in economic uncertainty, we have 24 million. So if we do nothing and we start spending down, so this first year, you see the reserve is 24 million. We do nothing. We've already kind of accounted for the 10 million. So we start FY27 with that same 24, and then you have the 13 million to plug up that hole for next year. You start 28 with the 10 million that's remaining, and you have another $13 million deficit. So you can see pretty quickly by doing nothing, your economic uncertainty fund went from 24 million down to negative 2.4 million. Now, if you still do on the next part of it, start doing moderate changes, FY27, it would take you to 2023 before you can still continue to spend down. It's not what we want to do, because again, we're starting with 24 million and you're taking that down to 620,000. The 20% is basically 2.5 months, roughly 2.5 months of expenses. So you don't want your economic uncertainty fund, which is for emergencies, to get down to 620, because that's not enough to take care of any sizable emergency that we may have. So those are the things that I wanted to actually share with you. And from that, I'm going to pass it back to Hans.
So thank you, Rafaela. What we are doing in the next 60 minutes or so, we will introduce you to our index card systematic where we try to summarize all the various proposals. They are ordered for the presentation purposes from high feasibility to low feasibility. We use green and yellow cards, and then the green cards are things that we can do directly to help the general fund. The yellow cards are indirect support for the general fund. We will ask you to take those cards home and then work with those cards, and please come back to us on next week, Tuesday, at that council meeting with us with your preferred solutions to bridge the $10 million structural deficit. We encourage you not to stop at 10 million because you know that that is just the current projection that we have. If you can identify more than $10 million in deficit reductions, that would be very helpful. What we ask you to do is sort your piles into yes, maybe, and no. And if you feel so inclined, and also constituents are reaching out to you, and there are great ideas that we just didn't cover, please add your own index cards as well, because again, we are not all knowledgeable, and every good idea is an idea that we need to incorporate. Next slide, please. I wanted to read from the city manager's budget message. If you pull it up, it's a little longer. Where's that slide, sir? Let's see. We'll get to it. So let me start reading from the city manager's budget message. All of us, city council, residents of the city neighborhoods, and city staff are in agreement with the basic purpose of the Neighborhood Improvement Fund to devote increased attention to maintaining the quality of life in our neighborhoods through the building and maintaining of appropriate public facilities, parks, streets, walkways, recreational facilities, and other improvements. Two policy questions need to be answered. First, the amount of money which should be devoted to this purpose in this year's budget, and also identifying the smoothest and most effective process for developing and reviewing proposed neighborhood improvements in a fair and equitable manner. The latter consideration was discussed at length with neighborhood representatives at the adjourned city council meeting. Regarding the appropriate amount, is it adequate and appropriate given the other priorities and needs in the city? Stated differently, should additional money be devoted to this program? And what are the implications and impacts of doing that? Responding first to the second question, the answer is that it would be possible to do so. However, any additional monies devoted to this program would be of necessity be taken from other programs of the city. To give a more specific answer, any allocation of TOT monies for any specified purposes represents a reduction of that amount which flows to the general fund of the city, and as such will ultimately represent a decrease in one or more of the city's operating budget, capital improvement program, and general fund reserves for future emergencies. So that was the city manager's budget message. Next slide. In 1985 and 86, when the TOT program was being discussed in front of the city council. And what the city manager in 1985 and 1986, and those who want to know who it was can look up on the wall, was John Dunn. What he was warning about is that the neighborhood improvement program, while a good idea, will eventually catch up with the city's other expenses. And the question at that time he wisely asked, how much should we actually devote to this type of program? So 40 years later, we are here, and next slide, facing a structural deficit. Next slide. And so what I wanted to show you is how were we staffed in those years when we had just approved the NIP program at that time in 1987 to 89. We had 22.5 folks working in the library. Today it's 14. We had 13.75 people working in streets. Today it's 6.53. If you want to see the 0.53 employee, I can show him to you. We have in parks 22.55 folks in 1987-89. It's now 18.26, and I bet you we added probably about 10 to 12 parks since 1987-89. Planning, we had 10.81, 9.5. Conference center, at that time, we had 15. We're down to 12 and a quarter. So what I'm showing you here is we have shrunken our workforce since the invention of our NIP program or the NCI program, but we also have built up other programs, and this is just a snapshot of that. So the next slide is now we are getting into the, so I went back 40 years just to show you what was already predicted at that time, what the city may suffer at one time, that we have to look at all of our programming, especially also at programs that we are very, very proud of, like the program that everyone agreed in those days of the neighborhood improvement program as well. So with that, I wanted to lead into the cards. We have divided the cards up into different sections, and Nat will describe the cards now.
Great. Thanks so much, Hans. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. What we've done is developed these index cards that provide a view of not every single option, but as many options as staff could come up with that look at various reduction strategies for the deficit. The title of each card, as you see up in the upper left corner, there's the title. We also have assigned a value to each card. There's the value is based on the amount of dollars that it would take to reduce the deficit by out of the $10 million needed. Now, it's important to also recognize that we have, in addition to the value, the frequency. What we have in the green cards, and the green cards address the ongoing efforts that will help address the structural deficit. Yellow cards that we've presented to you are items that indirectly address either the deficit or the city's budget at large. And so many of the green cards will have an ongoing frequency, and that is similar to a tax measure that provides revenue to the city on an ongoing basis versus one-time revenue. Some of the one-time revenue options that you'll see in the card deck will include yellow cards that might be one-time revenue, other types of reduction strategies that may not directly address the fiscal deficit. We also have a time frame listed. The time frame describes how soon the strategy can provide revenue. So some of them can be immediate, things that we can implement now. Some may be short-term, mid-term, and others may be long-term. Taxes, for example, may take, depending on whether they're added to the ballot in June of 2026 or added and voted on by voters and approved in November of 2026, would not actually bring revenue into the city's coffers until late 2026 or perhaps 2027. So that's helpful to keep in mind as we're trying to address the fiscal deficit starting in the 2026-27 year. The feasibility is also a factor. High feasibility means that only council needs to approve that measure in order for that to pass. Medium feasibility, we've classified as items that require not only the council support, but voter support, perhaps a third party. And then low feasibility, these are items that are on the list that requires more than just the council and voter approval. The pilots, for instance, the property taxes or revenue in lieu of taxes, that's just one example that requires negotiation with each of the parties. And even if voters and council agree to it, another party needs to agree to those payments as well. We'll go to the next slide. So some information and background on the ballot initiatives. A number of the recommendations that we're providing for you this afternoon are items that are tax measures, sales tax measures, various measures that would require approval from the voters. There are two upcoming elections. The first is on June 2nd of 2026, and the second is on November 3rd of 2026. There are some advantages and disadvantages to placing a tax measure on the June ballot. The first is that it certainly will reduce overcrowding of tax measures that might be on the November ballot. And depending on the tax, it could allow for collections of taxes sooner. In the case of June, we could receive funds as early as October 1 of 2026. One thing to keep in mind is that a June tax measure would cost more than placing it on the November ballot. A little bit more probably on the high end of what we listed here, the $131,000 per election. Also, there are stricter requirements. Placing a tax measure, any tax measure on the June ballot would require a declaration of the fiscal emergency, and it would also require a unanimous support from all members of the city council. So that's also something to keep in mind. The November tax measure, on the other hand, would cost less to administer, would require 2/3 vote of council. So 4 out of 5 council members would have to support that. As with all tax measures, at least the ones that we're presenting here, 50% plus one or supermajority, depending on the case, is required for approval. And that does vary depending on the type of tax. We'll go to the next slide. Before you are a list. This is a table of contents of sorts that shows the various deficit reduction strategies. As I mentioned, we have yellow cards and green cards. The green cards are strategies that directly address the $10 million deficit. So the goal is to come up with as many cards as possible in the green card category that will get us to the $10 million deficit in the yes pile. The yellow cards are also very important to us. And I'll use some examples. I won't read each of these because we're going to go through each of the cards one by one and each of the strategies one by one. But just to use one example with card number 21, this is the public safety facility bond. We don't currently have a funding source for the public safety facility, which is in dire need of replacement. A bond would address this need. It is in the yellow card pile because it is not a direct benefit. But it's important to note that without a bond, the city would likely have to use general fund dollars to pay for it. Using general fund dollars to pay for a public safety facility would exacerbate the $10 million fiscal deficit that we have to the general fund. Card number 22, we measure P&S very similarly. It's important because while it's a current source of special revenue, without it, general fund dollars would have to be used to support that strategy. So we're inviting members of the city council, members of the public as well, who've already chimed in, to sort the cards into 3 piles. Yes, you like the solution. Maybe you're maybe not so sure, or no, it's not an option that the city should pursue. What we are planning is next week on Tuesday evening is to gather your input and identify where there may be consensus from council on each of these strategies, where there may be support from not only you, but members of the community. And please know that there may be some other deficit reduction strategies that we may not have thought of or presented, and we certainly invite you to add that as well.
Okay, before we go to the next slide, I just want to remind the council one more time that what the index cards are showing you are options, alternatives, ideas, suggestions. But many of those cards are outside of the council's control. Many of those measures are outside of your control. So we cannot really bridge a structural deficit with things that we are not fully having under the city council's authority. So with that, I start with the first card that we are showing here. The city charter allows wisely the council to determine if there are insufficient funds available to provide for the ordinary and necessary services in any budget year. They may, by an affirmative vote of 4, reduce the amount of funding appropriated to neighborhood and community improvement program. So that program right now is funded with $6 million. The city charter clearly identifies that if we have a structural deficit, which can lead to us not paying our employees or not paying for other services that the city residents require, there is an opportunity to reappropriate funding from the NCIP. That can be $1 million, $500,000 to up to the whole amount. So again, that is a value of up to $6 million. And when you think about that, we received also proposals already through our email system where folks said, well, take X amount from the NCIP, or don't take all, but take this amount. So this is something that you have to consider. And again, think when you look at the index cards also that what are the resources that we actually can control, and what are the resources that we cannot control, in order also to build hopefully a budget picture that will reduce the structural deficit. Next slide. We are using existing attrition for salary savings right now we are estimating right now with a chilled position around $1.5 million in savings for the current budget year. But there are certainly more we can do. And if we are using existing attrition, and if we are reducing the number of budgeted positions between 15 to 20 at an average cost per employee of $154,000, including salaries and benefits and pension, that could add up to $3.1 million. So we can slim down further. But I want to tell you that all departments will be affected by that. That includes not just the departments like Public Works, but also other public safety departments can be affected by that. And of course, we have to honor the existing bargaining agreements when we talk about attrition across the board. That means also that there are negotiations with all the bargaining units as part of that. That is something that the council can do, approval required just by the city council. The next one is the 911 fee, and here's where net comes into play again.
Great. Thank you, Hans. The first responder fee program. So as many of you know, the fire department has increased the paramedic program's reach today, with all 3 Monterey engines providing advanced life support ALS services 24/7. And the aerial ladder truck providing ALS service as staffing allows. And not all cities provide this higher level of service. What is becoming more common are first responder fees. And the way that these first responder fees work is that anytime there's an ALS or paramedic response from the fire department, there's a billing involved directly to the insurance company, either of the automobile insurance if it involves a vehicle collision, and if it involves a medical call, the health insurance is billed. And there are over 24 agencies throughout California currently that provide and currently have this cost recovery fee program. Examples include Anaheim, Folsom, Long Beach, Napa, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Vallejo. In 2024, our fire department responded to 5,475 rescue and medical calls, which is about 55% of the total calls within our fire department. The way, what we're recommending is revenue from this proposal and from this program could be transferred from the general fund and then dedicated specifically to public safety equipment and vehicle replacement, which continues to increase year over year. Under the proposed program, the fire department could charge fees for these types of emergency medical responses. So the insurance providers, whether that's auto or health, would be billed by a third-party billing agency. It's important to also note that with all of the programs, and the city would do this as well, we would have a compassionate billing policy that allows for the complete waiving or the reduction of the fees for those who have financial hardship, those who might not have insurance or where insurance doesn't cover the full cost. We understand there's cities that have this program may be concerned that folks may be more reluctant to call 911 because there's a fee. That's where the compassionate billing comes in, but we also have cost recovery that's important as well. The cost could range anywhere between $400 from a medical aid call or $700 per motor vehicle collision when there's extrication involved. Revenue from this program could bring in as much as $800,000 annually. We've put the $700,000 figure in the upper right-hand corner. And happy to answer any questions you have on this when we go to questions. This card here, we put as a value of up to $360,000. And it's an opportunity for council, for the community to look at if there are any current programs or other services that might be provided by the city at a premium cost that we like to reduce. Some of those services or programs might be more efficiently provided by outside organizations or nonprofits. I know some of the programs that is a priority for council currently is the rental assistance program. We brought back the special event support program. Not every city provides grants to other nonprofit organizations that could reduce the budget expenses by $50,000. The city currently provides funding also and sponsorship to First Night in Monterey at the cost of $35,000. So these are just some examples of programs or services that could be reduced and also yield savings in terms of expenditures to the city and the general fund. This next card is optimizing Veterans Park Campground. Many of you know Veterans Park Campground located in the hills of Monterey in the Monterey Vista neighborhood features campsites on a first come, first served basis. This past year, the campground brought in $115,000 in net revenue after all the expenses. And a few years ago, we updated campsite fees to be more competitive and to bring in greater cost recovery. Just an example of the base fee for campsites is $47 per day. But we also know there are some other opportunities to expand the campground and potentially bring in more revenue for the general fund. Some of those include accepting online reservations. Folks sometimes are more reluctant to go to the campground because they've packed all their gear. I go camping every once in a while, used to go more often. And a lot of folks aren't as willing to go to a campground if they don't have the reservation ahead of time and show up with all their gear. Increasing and providing online reservations can bring additional revenue to the city. Also expanding the number of campsites, perhaps using campsite hosts to help provide some of the services so that our park staff can focus on other areas within the community, or just some examples in addition to maximizing revenue from the two group areas and picnic areas to bring more revenue to the city coffers. A conservative estimate is that we could bring in $125,000 to the general fund by implementing some of these strategies here at the campground. Changing government access providers. For many years, we've appreciated and are very proud of our partnership with AMP, a program that we've had and a partnership we've had for many years. There's staff from AMP in the audience, David Cardoza, who's working behind the scenes for our city council chambers and many of our boards and commission meetings. We also recognize, though, that the cost for these services through Access Media Productions, which is a nonprofit in our community, continues to increase. The annual cost for the service last year was $256,000, just over. And we paid for that using two different sources of revenue. One is $118,000 in franchise fees, and the other is $137,000 in what's called PEG fees, or the public educational and governmental fees. There's an opportunity for the city to look at other service providers, and doing so could allow the city to keep all of its franchise fees, $118,000, as part of general fund revenue, like many other cities do in our county and throughout California. So it's one option for the city council and our community to consider. I'm going to pass the next slide and next couple of slides to Hans.
The next slide is in conjunction also with another card that we categorize as yellow. But if we are eliminating 7 underutilized properties that have a total right now of $2.3 million in urgent repairs, the annual reduction in operational cost, utility cost, will be likely around $150,000. The 7 properties that we are proposing right now include the Vasquez Adobe, the French Consulate, the Harbor Yard, the Gordon House, the Ketchum House, and the Casanova Oak Knoll neighborhood building, not the park. Next slide. We suggest discontinuing the Mills Act approval. There are a total of, I think, over 120 properties eligible for that. We have roughly 66 in the program right now. You know that they receive significant property tax relief in exchange for having the property owners preserving and restoring these historic properties. We propose to completely eliminate that program and keep all the property taxes in the city. The next is a sales tax approval. As we discussed with the council a few months back, there is another 0.375% of sales tax available, and those 0.375% will lead to an additional infusion of $4.5 million into the general fund. But what you will notice with that is now we are in the cards where you have council and voter approval required for that. So this is the first card where you are losing your complete authority over that process. And now we are talking about ideas that can help us to balance the budget, but where we depend also on the voters to support that. Sales tax is always an interesting one because our wealth, our service levels are 62% paid by non-residents when you just look at the sales tax. Again, sales tax is paid by 62% of non-residents. That's not a happy thought for the residents who pay the higher sales tax, but with the inflow of the visitors and that we have and the other residents from other cities shopping in Monterey, that is an interesting number always to mention. Next slide. Admission tax. That is a tax where we would basically look at taxing the venues such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium, Monterey County Fairgrounds, Golden State Theater, the movie theaters, other ticketed events with a 5% ticket tax that would go to the general fund. Of course, the big tax revenue generator is the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And when we look at their latest published reports of visitors who are paying the ticket fees there, the Monterey Bay Aquarium alone could generate with a 5% admission tax $3.3 million. That will be a very interesting conversation should the council go for that, because we saw a couple of years ago, I want to say 12 years ago, in Pacific Grove, how that adventure went for Pacific Grove together with the aquarium. Having said all that, it is something that is totally paid by the visitors who are visiting all those venues, including the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The next is a topic that was brought forward also by some of the council members, is a vacancy tax. This is basically a tax that will impose a tax on vacant commercial properties and empty homes. If you live less than 6 months in your second home, you will be taxed according to the underlying idea of a vacancy tax. The idea is that it would increase housing availability. It would also combat speculation. And here's my warning for you. Those funds are expected one way or another to also end up in housing programs or city rental assistance programs. So I wouldn't count those funds immediately as a large help for the general fund, because I would see some arguments being made as part of that ballot measure to ensure that some of those funds are being returned to the renters to help the rental market. The note here is San Francisco's vacancy tax is on appeal and pending a decision on the legality of the tax. So I think that is a tax that comes with quite a number of constraints right now. Next one is Nat.
Yes, next.
Nat.
The next card is on parking tax, and some cities have a parking tax in place. So parking is not subject to sales tax. So a number of cities, Santa Cruz is just one example, has a tax on parking, and we estimate we have roughly 1,400 private parking spaces strictly on privately managed parking lots in the city. Some of the examples are the Clement Hotel parking, Portola Plaza parking, Heritage Harbor, and others. And most likely these parking garages and parking venues are paid by visitors and non-residents. A 5% tax, we believe, on private parking spaces could generate as much as $450,000. A 10% tax rate would double that amount generated. Last year, as in one example, voters in Santa Monica increased the parking tax rate from 10% to 18% for non-city parking facilities, and it was estimated to bring in an additional $6.8 million to Santa Monica's general fund. San Francisco's parking tax, as an example, is 25%. San Francisco is 20%. And then Santa Cruz, LA, and Malibu are at 10%, just as examples in California. Streaming tax. This tax, worth noting, is currently on appeal in the court system and is working its way through. But to share with all of you, since 2017, 2018, the city's revenue from cable franchise fees has declined an average of 4% per year, resulting in at least $300,000 in lost revenue over the past 8 years. And so over 40 California cities have started to tax streaming services, often pass as an extension of the utility users tax, or UUT, at a rate of anywhere between 5% to 7%. And as we all know, and me personally at home, I've cut cable as well, subscribe to whether it's Paramount Plus or other services, Netflix, and having a tax on those streaming services can bring in $440,000 in revenue to address our $10 million deficit. The next one is potentially updating our real property transfer tax, also known as a documentary transfer tax. The transfer tax is applied at the county level anytime there's a transfer of real property. The city's current tax rate is 55 cents per $1,000 of property value, and the county's rate is the same. That's the statutory limit. That's a standard statewide, but charter cities can have a charter city only transfer tax. Based on that, we could potentially increase our rate from 55 cents per $1,000 value of property to $1.10 per $1,000 of value. Part of the caveat is the county, if we have a charter city only transfer tax, the county would need to retain all of the revenue from the base tax. So the total combined tax rate for the city and the county would be $2.20 per 1,000. Some cities charge more. LA charges $4.50 per 1,000. Oakland charges between 1 and 2.5% of the total value. It is worth noting there's a current proposal, AB 698, that is being sponsored by Majority Whip Assemblymember Gonzalez from LA, as well as Assemblymember Buffy Wicks from Oakland, cities that happen to have the highest property transfer tax rates, that would limit charter city only transfer taxes to the current statutory rate, thereby eliminating our option to increase this tax altogether. So that is currently working through the state legislature right now. And that's important to note before considering this card. Okay, next card is Hans.
Most of the things we do in the city are services that you can buy on the marketplace as well. Public safety services probably is not as much as a commodity than landscaping, mowing lawns, fixing potholes, etc. So this category is a category where we say we can look at ideas to find ways in, number one, finding partners who do the things we are doing already that we don't have to do. When you look at the Scholze Center, you see already we have strong partnerships with partners who are providing services there. Do we have similar models out there where we just provide staffing at the Scholze Center and the programming is done by somebody else? So that's one idea. Do we have to do everything in-house? Is it easier for us to purchase services, labor somewhere else where we think it's a good opportunity? And keep in mind what I said. I think everything in the city is a commodity except policing and also fire. But everything else you can buy also somewhere else in the region. And I give you an example here because we discussed it in front of the council a few months back when we had a landscaping contract in front of council, and council was hearing also we should keep this in-house. We ran the numbers for last year when we used the landscaping contractor, and using the that contractor and comparing it with the labor hours that we would have spent with our cost, we saved over $240,000 that for a contract that was a little over $400,000 that we spent on that. So this is the idea, to talk about that and to see where opportunities to partner with others and where opportunities to use various means, including attrition, to find other ways of providing services. Next slide is what Ned called pilots earlier, but it stands for payment in lieu of taxes. And it's something that is absolutely voluntary with the partners that we have to meet with. But when you look at Montage Health, Monterey Bay Aquarium, Middlebury, Cal State Monterey, these are all large-scale operations that are tax exempt and do not pay property taxes. However, they all receive a considerable amount of police services, fire services, public works, and other services at no cost. And we are not getting paid, and they don't pay us property tax. And the moment this property is purchased for $8-10 million, that property is off the public payroll, and Montage Health keeps buying properties and keeps swallowing smaller outfits in order to provide healthcare for our local residents. But we are still providing services for that, but we're not getting revenue. So the payment in lieu of taxes is a negotiation tool to sit down with those nonprofits and find the hook to negotiate with them and find the angle to make them interested in delivering reimbursements in lieu of taxes to the city coffers. The next one is the Central Public Safety Building Bond Measure. It, again, as Ned introduced it earlier, the strategy does not address the structural deficit, but would address an unfunded need. And it outlines here what we can do in order to fund a public safety building, which may cost between $90 and $100 million. One of them is to allocate a portion of the NCIP funds to bond payments. Another one would be voter-approved general obligation bond measure to be paid through property tax. And there are various variations of how you can structure a bond payment for that. Next. Renew Measure P&S. Again, this is not a strategy, and that's why it's yellow, that reduces the structural deficit. But if we wouldn't have Measure P&S, we would need to have funds to continue to invest in our city sidewalks, city streets, and our storm drains and ADA improvements with our traffic signals. So again, this is something, again, where the council, hopefully, as Rafaela said, you need to do that, where the council will hopefully send us a signal to continue that, and we need voter approval for that. If we do not change Measure P&S and leave it as it is right now, as it is approved, we only need 50% plus one vote to get it approved. If we are doing anything change to the existing Measure P&S, just adding a simple word to that ballot measure, we need, again, 2/3 majority. Next slide, sell underutilized properties. I shared with you those 7 properties that we think are really liabilities for us and not assets anymore. We estimate that they can fetch on the market around $10 million. And again, that is a yellow card that would not reduce the structural deficit, but it would help us to balance the budget while we are trying to catch up through other measures, including tax measures. It gives us room to breathe, also gives us a one-time infusion in certain areas where we need to invest CIP funding right now. Next is Ned.
All right. Next is Measure G. So in March of 2020, just days before the COVID-19 shutdown, 63% of Monterey voters approved a half-cent sales tax, the half-cent, 50-cent sales tax for a period of 9 years. Now, it's important to note that this initiative will end on June 30th of 2029, which would then cause the structural deficit to balloon. And again, this brings in $6 million on an annual basis directly into the general fund for any purpose. Updating stormwater fees. We began collecting stormwater fees through Monterey One Water for many years. And when we transitioned sewer collections through the property tax roll, we adopted new sewer fees. And we recognized the need and took a hiatus on collecting stormwater fees. It is our hope to bring back a stormwater fee as we're currently finalizing our stormwater fee study and bring this back in fiscal year 26-27 with voter approval. And this is a mailed ballot for property owners and is not typically part of a county's election process. It would have to go through a Prop 218 process and is here. Currently, the general fund does cover the cost this year of the stormwater needs. Parking fee strategy. Again, this is another indirect strategy that does not directly reduce the structural deficit, but it would increase revenue in the parking fund. And it's worth noting that the parking fund can actually be, which is currently an enterprise fund, can be absorbed into the general fund. And the more revenue that we generate in the parking fund can also support the general fund. And as long as we maintain and set aside dollars for parking facility maintenance and replacement. Some of the examples that our parking consultant has recommended to council over the years include extending downtown parking garage hours, enforcing parking in private parking lots that also helps encourage on-street parking and paid parking, and then also adding paid on-street parking in key strategic locations such as downtown. And putting in not necessarily parking meters, but parking pay stations downtown could bring in upwards of $627,000 per year to the parking fund, or if it's part of the general fund, it would do the same. Hans has this one.
I have all the popular ones. The Tideland leases. The aquarium covers a great deal of Tideland leases, and the city has traditionally agreed to a lease that covers receives about $1 per year in rent for the area that the aquarium is leasing over the Tidelands. We will have increased cost in the Tideland area with respect to sea level rise. We are charging other property owners who are extending into the Tidelands quite a good sum of money. For instance, Bubblegum, 700 Building, Monterey Plaza Hotel, and others who are paying a market rate for the privilege of being over the Tidelands. If we are negotiating with the aquarium, there's a process for that actually in place where the aquarium provides an appraisal for the Tidelands. We provide an appraisal with our appraiser. And then shouldn't we not be identical, which I doubt, a third party will sit down with both appraisers and they will determine what is the right appraisal amount, what is the lease rent. So we expect, and we are very covered here to not give away what we think it's worth, but it will increase anywhere between $500 to $1 million. And this money would go into the Tidelands. This money would help us, the city, pay for expenditures we have to make sooner than later with respect to the relocation of utilities, relocation of roads and streets that are then threatened by the sea level rise. The next one is we have, as you've heard last week, Tuesday, quite a backlog in NCIP projects. Despite all the good work of our team members, there is, I believe, funding available to defund a bunch of the projects that we haven't started yet and that also maybe not necessarily add the maintenance aspects that we discussed last time as well, where there are worth projects that help us with existing buildings, existing assets. And we went over that very roughly. We think there is a value at least of $12.5 million when we said TBD. That is kind of coy. We think there are projects that will amount to about $12.5 million where we say, let's take them off the list. We are not getting to it in any foreseeable future, and free up those funds. Again, this is one-time money that we are receiving, but it will also help us in our funding strategy to get through the next few years. The next one is heresy. Charter amendment for the VAF. That VAF zone is the vehicle, the visitors accommodation facility district that basically froze the positions of the hotels and said there shall be never and ever any other hotels in place where we have now the hotels, and nothing else can go up anywhere else. We feel this is a real impediment now. Monterey is falling behind with respect to competition from neighboring cities. And we need to discuss to loosen up the restrictions that the VAF zoning imposes on us. It doesn't mean necessarily that you will see now brand new hotels getting built on window on the bay, but we need to be able to shovel spaces around in zones where we have already hotels. When you look at North Fremont, for instance, North Fremont can provide more economic development opportunities if there is a chance to demolish a hotel, put it somewhere else up on North Fremont in an abandoned strip mall or something, and put something interesting there that the neighbors really like. So we have to discuss VAF zoning and what opportunities that charter change may give us. And so again, approval is required by City Council, but we also need a vote of the people for that. And with that, that concludes so far our structural deficit reduction strategies. We will bring this back on September 2nd to you. We, again, as I shared with you earlier, we hope to listen and learn from you and see also what you sort into the piles of yes, maybe, or no. And then very rough calendar September. We need to start with an opinion research and strategy firm to identify themes around potential ballot measures. Is it viable or not? We need to go start October 2025, maybe also a transparent public outreach process with our residents involved that will help us to identify the appetite for some of the measures and hopefully help us identify additional new measures. And then late 2025, early 2026, we need to kind of finalize the long-term strategies. So next steps, we are handing you now out the index cards. And so every single one of you gets a package of those index cards that we hope you will ponder and write on and figure out what you want to do. We expect a lot of questions from you right now.
Thank you.
And also we hope that we receive some public comments tonight. I can share with you, and you have seen those emails as well that came in from some of our constituents. There appears to be a good understanding of the challenge ahead, and there seems to be also a good willingness to compromise on certain topics. So I believe the community who has responded in writing so far has been very constructive and very supportive and very understanding of the challenges that lay ahead. So again, please take those cards, ask us questions now, and then at the end we will see each other again next week, Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. and hopefully can together with the City Council develop some strategies for quite a few of those budget reduction strategies that we just presented to you. So thank you for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you, Hans and team, for the presentation and introduction to this. I'll open up to the council for questions, but just kind of high level to try to work our way through in time management. We're going to end by 6 o'clock. So brevity in this space is helpful. I think the goal from the council's perspective for today is trying to get questions that might be able to help us prioritize our cards. We'll be able to provide additional public input and feedback at the council meeting next week. So we'll do questions now, save comments until after public comment. And then we'll come back to the council and then just high level feedback comments from the council. So not looking to get drilled down in any of the specific proposals that have been given to us by staff. So just trying to set expectations here a little bit so we can try to move through the next 55 minutes. Do you want to start us off with questions?
No, I'm going to pass on questions because
Okay.
I'd rather hear from the public and I want to make sure we don't run out of time.
Sure.
So I'm okay to just let the process move and then save my questions for later today if there's time or next week.
Appreciate that, Councilmember Smith. Anybody have questions, please?
Yeah.
We'll do Councilmember Rash and then we'll go to Dr. Barber.
Okay. Are there any of the Mills Act properties that would be grandfathered in? The current ones would be grandfathered or what?
We're working on that policy right now. We are proposing to not grandfather them in, but have them expire after 10 years.
And is there any admission, I think it's admission tax on the aquarium now?
No, there's not.
Okay.
So the aquarium will fight us tooth and nails on the admission tax. If history repeats itself, because that is what they did in 2015 or so when Pacific Grove was in financial dire straits and contemplated a similar tax measure.
And if you'll just walk through for the public, some of these I'm asking for the public because they've asked me. The contractors for partnerships and contracts for the cities, the contractors would be cheaper because no, we aren't worried about health insurance, we aren't worried about pensions. So the follow-up question of concern and interest to me is, so we would be hiring contractors who may not have health insurance for their employees. Is there any liability there? No, I guess not to us. Okay. All right.
The labor cost is one particular concern, but what you also need to understand is that we are not then paying for the vacation. We're not paying for the sick time. We are not paying for the ramp up costs to get the crews ready at 8 a.m. and then they roll out of the yard, for instance, and then they come back and clean the tools. We pay actually then just for the labor delivered on site for a project. And that is all baked in the cost of a contractor. And you have various contractors. You have contractors from Granite Construction to Don Chapin to smaller contractors that pay healthcare. They have 401k plans, etc. So it does not necessarily mean that you select contractors that are not in conformance with the labor laws in the state of California.
Okay. On the parking fee, and probably this is a question down the line if we do the parking fees, we could expand really to perhaps a heavily impacted area like Del Monte that has so many visitors tying up the traffic there.
So the parking fee is a fee that we suggested for imposing on privately managed parking lots.
Yeah.
And so you see when you drive through Cannery Row on certain days of the year, we just saw a sign parking no in and outs $100 on Cannery Row. And you have other privately operators there that are charging fees that are way beyond what we are charging right now. By the way, Cannery Row parking garage is, I believe, $25 on peak during peak times. So we're talking about 1,400 private parking spaces. The other theory about the parking strategy was we can also look at areas where we are collecting funds and where we can expand parking in downtown. For instance, Kali Principal parking garage, after 6 p.m. we do not charge, but we have customers probably till 10 p.m. there. We can also provide mobile parking stations up and down Alvarado, Kali Principal, and collect funding for those as well. So these were two different proposals that Nat prepared and presented.
Well, I received from the public the suggestion that we charge for parking down in Del Monte, that we have meters
On Del Monte,
down Del Monte Beach area
okay,
where there's so many
Got it.
visitors
Yeah.
that might be an idea
yeah.
for getting more money.
So there is the little thing called Coastal Commission,
Mm.
and it might be a little bit more difficult in certain areas because you need to convince the Coastal Commission also of their of the eligibility of
The
that.
little part is a joke, right?
Yeah.
And a question I got from the public, is there any water bills that we are paying for the military installations?
No.
Okay. That's it. Thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Barber.
Yes, 3 questions very quickly. Number 19, that's also dealing with the partnership and contracts.
Yeah.
How would this impact dealing with unions and current staff skill set?
Yeah, it will require, generally speaking, a meet and confer with the bargaining units when you are finding ways of delegating or changing the work that is assigned to staff. You have to go through a meet and confer process. And once you have completed that process, you, the council, can make that decision.
Okay, thank you. Next, I had a question dealing with, is there a time limit if we were to do any renewals on the measures P, S, or G? Is there a time limit on those?
There are currently time limits, and again, we have to weigh what the public will tell us through our research. For instance, measure PNS, there was a time limit of 4 years and then of 9 years. And a research firm will connect with the voters and will find out what is your appetite for that. Do you want it for 5 years, for 10 years? And we should really listen to what the public is telling us, what they feel they want to do. With Measure G, that was a half-cent sales tax, as Ned presented, and there was a time limit of 10 years, I think, 9 years. And I remember exactly why it was 9 years, but there will be, again, Measure G, I think, needs to be renewed with no expiration date, but we need to again listen to the public and hear what is their appetite in approving that.
Correct. And there is a timetable for us to have to get that on the ballot? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And that's one of the instruction cards. I think card number 2 explains that.
Okay. And last question here, because that was part B, is actually dealing with Measure G. So number 24, part number 24 and card number 13 deals with sales tax.
Yeah.
How does this work together? Are those 2 separate increases? How does that work?
So I unfortunately don't know what card number 24 is. What was?
Yeah.
So 13 is dealing with the increase of the sales tax, and then 24, I believe, is
Measure G.
Measure G.
Yeah.
Cheat sheet, not the card. Both of those, Dr. Barber, sales tax measures are general sales tax. It would go towards the general fund. They're just on different timelines.
Yes.
Measure G would be on a track that expires on June 30th, 2029. This new 0.375% sales tax, let's say council decides to place it on the ballot in June, it would be on a separate track and either be in perpetuity or whatever council decides. And
Those are two separate increases
two separate ones.
on
But
sales tax.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Few questions here, starting with Mills Act. Could you describe to me the equation again that brings us to the $50,000 value?
Yes, and that's a great question because these are just the annual staff time that we are saving. The property tax is already in our coffers right now of the properties we will not use for Mills Act, and so we cannot double count that. So that is a very astute observation. So the $50,000 is just the annual staff time cost avoided. And the property tax that we are not losing will remain in the property tax. And so it does not increase our structural deficit, but if we lose it, it will increase, it will not decrease the structural deficit, but if we're losing the property tax, it would then increase the structural deficit. The 50,000 though are just the cost of staffing.
Got it. Thank you.
But if I could, Councilmember Garcia, add that based on our analysis, if all of the current Mills Act properties were to fall off the current agreements, we would regain $160,000 in property tax loss. But those wouldn't be realized until after all of the existing contracts
Got it.
expire. That's on top of the staff time that Hans mentioned.
And this will be in 10 plus years. So that's nothing happening.
And recognizing that we have 61 properties that are still eligible for a Mills Act, but haven't taken advantage of that. If all of those properties were to go to a Mills Act, we would lose an additional $250,000 in general fund revenue in the future.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Going to NCIP, I think it would be helpful for me to get maybe annual either estimates or actuals of the amount spent on projects for maybe the past 5-10 years, just to kind of get in my mind maybe an average figure. So I guess maybe that's a request. I'll pose it as a question if it's possible to get that. Going to attrition. So I think I saw on the card that there are 70 openings currently, more or less. Let's say there was interest in reducing that number by 20. How, and just maybe a general idea of how these 20 positions would be identified across all departments?
So if you use attrition and you say 15 to 20, I'm very sure you will identify them by their willingness to leave the city for another job or by being promoted somewhere else. These are not positions we would just use what it is, attrition, which is people are leaving on a voluntary basis. These are not terminations. And so we would, but you're touching actually the core question of that is also, well, what if this position is trading, and what are we doing if we really need that position back? You cannot have attrition in certain positions that are actually in a way not replaceable by this immediately, that are not replaceable. So again, those 15 to 20 will happen probably over the course of a year or so. And that could be a path forward. In addition to that, we are not contemplating termination or layoffs here. We are just discussing, okay, if we use attrition as a model, that will cause problems, of course, for the departments. Let's just say we have 3 park maintenance workers retiring. The parks will be still there. So what are we doing? We would basically come up with a model to tell neighbors, your neighborhood park will not be serviced as much as it was in previous years. We might not mow it every 2 weeks, or we might not do litter control on a weekly basis, etc., etc. So again, if 6 park maintenance workers retire or move on to other places, you have to replace at one time, because you cannot play the attrition card over and over again. But attrition is happening as we speak.
Right.
And that would be a way of increasing it to, say, 15 or 20 positions.
Okay. All right. Gives me something to think about. That's all I have. Thank you.
When we look at the potential cost savings associated with, say, taking a public position and making it private, what numbers are we looking at to make that determination? Is it based solely on the cost of the position, including salary and benefits from the public position versus how much the contract is?
Yeah. So also excellent question. We would look at functions. So I wouldn't look at a single position. I would suggest you look at a certain service that is provided by a group of employees, and you would say, okay, what does the market pay? What do we have to pay the market for this type of service? I'll give you an example. The city of Monterey at one time had 3 different tree crews, about 12 employees that were doing the tree trimming. And when we hit the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, we looked at various options. And one of the options that was considered by the council and ultimately approved by the city council was to get out of the business of tree maintenance. And we did this in 2009, 2010, and have since then just used private contractors for tree maintenance. And what we saved were not just the labor cost, but we also saved the very equipment intense cost to operate aerial lift trucks. We had 3 aerial lift trucks at the time, the chippers, the chipper trucks, etc. So we would look at function by function and do a cost comparison. And as we found out with our the tree crews, we didn't miss a beat, if I might say that.
I would just maybe share with this, and if possible, how we can look at this from the perspective of incorporating true costs. So what is the potential impact of the quality of the service? Maybe not all work, but some of the work. You're giving trees, so I'm imagining those folks would be local, but some of the work could be sent out of the area. So what is the loss of revenue associated with the taxes that come in from that individual that might be living here locally? So I just want to have us make sure that we're looking at all the different elements associated with that. And then in regards to how much tax revenue we're getting from visitors, I know we talked about this previously. We estimate that 100% of our TOT comes from visitors. It's not from locals, and 62% of our sales tax comes from visitors. But is there a way that we can look at those numbers to see how much of our general funds more or less are coming from visitors versus locals? I think would be just a helpful thing to look at. I'm not sure if that's something that we have or something that we can do.
Yeah, we can do it in our heads right now, because we know what the annual sales tax is times 0.62, and we know TOT is 36 million. So if we take $12 million of annual sales tax, right? Normal sales tax. And 7 point.
Well, and maybe too, this would be helpful to just include in our budget books moving forward, just to kind of help show some of those numbers. I think making a little bit more transparent there. And then the last question,
Before you move on,
please.
tell me again what you want to see in the budget book. How you want to see.
Ideally, if we can estimate how much of our revenues based off of visitors versus locals, I imagine that can be a little bit difficult. One of the things that I think of is parking. How do we determine? And I'm sure there's a way that we can probably estimate that. I was just basing it off of TOT and sales tax. But if we can expand beyond that,
Yeah.
I welcome that. And then the last question is, the list that was provided, and I don't remember what card number it was, but for the sale of underutilized properties, I wonder if it's possible to include a list of all the properties in the city, so that way we can get feedback from the public on maybe other properties that they may find or the council may find that are appropriate for sale. All right, that's it for me. Let's take it out to the public. We might limit time just depending on how many folks speak. So just kind of want to give a precursor for folks. For folks that may not be aware, what we do is we identify the individuals that want to speak during public comment at the beginning of the public comment period. And then once we identify those folks, we cut it off and only those folks get to speak. So I'm going to ask folks to identify themselves at the beginning, and then only those folks will be able to speak. So I'm going to check with folks on Zoom if you can use the raise hand function. While you're navigating your way there, I'm going to check in the chamber. Anybody in the chamber wish to speak on this item? So what I'll do is I'll ask you to step up to the left of the podium. And then if you want to remain seated, just hold tight. I'll ask for hands here in a second. I don't want to have you have to keep your hand raised while we're having folks adjust here. Bob, you want to come to the front? You want to come to the front, Bob? You're good? Okay. Okay, yeah, why don't you just come up first? Okay, is there anybody still seated that wants to speak on this item? Anybody that's seated other than Bob that wants to speak on this item? I don't see any hands up. So if you're not standing, you're not speaking in the chamber. Just want to make sure we got this all clear. Okay. So go ahead and cut it off to the chamber to the 2, 4, 6. Wait, my math. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. I have counted 10. So cut it off to the 10 in the chamber. And I'll do a countdown for folks on Zoom to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we have 3 on Zoom. So I'm going to do 2 minutes. And I'm just going to remind folks, we're going to be discussing this again at our council meeting on Tuesday. So if you have additional input, you can email the council, you can participate in our meeting next Tuesday. So we'll go ahead and, Bob, why don't you start us off in the chamber?
My name's Bob Evans. I'm the old cripple guy from New Monterey. I just want to suggest, if you haven't already done it, that the public have available all these nice cards to make comments on and maybe send them back into you ahead of the meeting next time. I don't know whether that's possible. Maybe you can put them up on the web or tell us to come down and pick them up at the city manager's office or whatever.
Thank you for it.
Sorry, no.
Okay, why don't we take the next speaker?
See if I can get through this in 2 minutes. I want to thank Hans and the team for creating the card system. I think it worked out very nicely and looking at the options. On a larger scale, the overall budgetary shortfall in private business, this would be a revenue shortfall from the expenditures, and that causes your gross margin to go down. And in public businesses, we do price increases. People are doing that for tariffs and everything else right now. So it's not a big surprise. In governments, it's a tax increase. And I think that's pretty much where we need to go as the move forward. NCIP, under new management has taken a different look. The program has been there for 40 years and has funded many council approved benefits to the community. I wanted to get a list of those, but unfortunately we don't have the history. Things like the EOC, Bay Window on the Bay, et cetera, are all NCIP projects that have been done. NCIP has been hailed as the most ground up democratic process in America and is the ideal way to engage the public and local government. And it has created a lot of interest in local government from the population. I would like to not see NCIP's current allocation hit because NCIP, with its new leadership, will likely be guiding the committee to approve only 10 to 15 projects. Many of those projects will be related to supporting Monterey Fire Department, Monterey Police Department, Parks and Recs and Forestry, ADA improvements, and public safety. We don't want projects that add to the backlog. We want projects that can get built. And that is what we're headed for. We all need to keep in mind that as the city looks and performs, our tourism is what brings them back, and the TOT. Leave it there.
You can finish your sentence.
Basically, my comment was that the TOT is the golden goose that helps us all, both the city and NCIP, and NCIP is a partner in helping to make the city the best it can be.
Thank you, Dennis.
Good afternoon. My name is Demetrius Kaplos. My wife and I have lived in Monterey for over 30 years. One of the things that we talk about is we want to increase taxes in a lot of areas here. What about the transient occupancy tax, the hotel tax? I understand that that's 12%. There's a lot of areas like San Francisco and the Bay Area that charge 14 or more. During this last car week, as an example, the Motel 6 on North Fremont was selling their last rooms for $1,000 a night. I really don't think some guy who's paying $1,000 a night is going to go, I'll pay $1,000 for this room, but if it's $1,000 and $10, no, I'm not going to pay it. So I don't think that 1% is really going to discourage a lot. And if you're, there's all these things here about asking citizens on sales tax and property tax we should increase the transient occupancy tax and look at that. Even if we do it again with a grandfather clause, or that we do it during certain times of the year. Another area, if we're going to sell city properties, let's sell them to entities that are going to generate revenue in the future. We have to rethink this. We don't want any more hotels business. If they're done tastefully, if they're done, aesthetically, if we're going to sell a city property, let's not sell it to some guy who's going to put a 5-acre estate on the property for himself. Let's sell it to something that's going to generate revenue, whether that revenue is through transient occupancy tax or some other method where we can generate sales tax. Again, if it's done aesthetically, even though we're not thinking about that. So let's be careful who we're selling those properties to. Before we do anything that raises taxes on the citizens, let's buy ourselves a little time here too, because really we're already, as Californians, paying some of the highest taxes in the country. Before we just say, let's fix this by raising taxes. The attrition thing is a really good thing. I'll have some other ideas for you about using interim positions to save money. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Demetrius.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Walker. I'm a Monterey citizen since 1972. And I feel that there is encouragement when I've heard about the possible modification of the VAF situation. And I think the very lucrative for the city way to do that and beneficial to the citizens of Monterey would be to open back up Airbnb for private citizens to do that in their homes for a variety of reasons. One, with some regulation on it, which eliminated pretty much the only complaint I had ever heard, which was there were a few fully leased out homes where people would come in and have a big party and it would disturb the neighborhood and not allow that. But the that the owner of the property who's doing Airbnb would either need to reside within that same property at the time it's being leased, or within 100, maybe say 300 feet of that property. So they're there. This would increase TOT. The cost to the visitor would increase, which a lot of cities, tourist cities, have seen now a big decline in visitorship, not so much at Car Week, but overall in general. And do this, it lowers the cost of people, families, to come to Monterey, because they can house themselves for a few days at a much lower cost, use that difference in cost to go out and visit the aquarium, go to restaurants, enjoy their vacation, and be here. So they're spending money in town, doing the parking and all of that. But I think that would be a significant increase. It could be licensing fees for the Airbnb property, and then a TOT tax on the usage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Noah Daniels, and I serve as the Executive Director of AMP, the public access television station currently recording and broadcasting this meeting. I know the city is facing a very real and very difficult budget deficit. Every dollar matters right now, and I don't envy the tough choices before you. AMP was founded in partnership with the City of Monterey in 1997, and since then it has grown into more than just a contract line item. AMP is a public institution that this community helped create. For nearly 3 decades, AMP has provided government transparency, a voice for local nonprofits, schools, and cultural groups, as well as a platform for civic engagement that no outside provider can fully replicate. The current proposal suggests a saving of $118,000 by replacing AMP. That figure represents just over 1% of the deficit, but in exchange, the community risks losing local jobs, decades of institutional knowledge, and a trusted civic resource that belongs to Monterey residents. I am not here to simply defend the status quo. We are ready to work with you to find creative solutions, restructuring, diversifying our funding, and doing all we can to reduce costs so that the city can achieve budget relief while still preserving this vital community service. While $118,000 may be a small number in the context of a $10 million challenge, the impact of this loss for AMP would be large and potentially irreversible. My hope is that we can work together on a path forward that maintains transparency, access, and a strong local voice for Monterey. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Hans Janisch, and I'm on, or the other Hans, as some people call me. I am part of NCIP and want to just say a few things. I think it is important that we don't repeat what we did during COVID, which was totally shut NCIP down. I think the committee has worked really well and is totally willing to work with the city. And my recommendation would be not, first of all, not to cancel all the past projects or many of the past projects. Let NCIP, knowing what's happening, go through the projects and identify projects that may not have the value that they were initially had when they were voted in, because many were voted in a long time ago. And second is, please don't cut all of the money for us. I think there may be some new real critical safety projects that the city would otherwise need to do that we can vote in. We can keep the process going. We have many new members. They can use these years to learn and the process and keep NCIP going, even if it's on a reduced basis. If you, let's say, take $5 million of the dollars, one idea was take $5 million of the dollars, leave us with somewhere a little less than $1 million, and then you're halfway there, and we can go through, decide what we want to fund. And if we don't use all the money, we can just decide to give some of that back as well in remaining balance. So just want you to think about the continuation of NCIP and the importance of it to the city, the residents, and the disappointments that they had during COVID, and that we try not to repeat that if we can. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kurt Tipton. I sent you all emails. Hopefully you read them. And Hans was saying almost exactly what I wanted to say, but I want to start with my neighborhood and talking about the neighbors and the tax initiatives. I have a really very conservative neighbor and a very liberal neighbor. And they both agreed that the sales tax is probably an excellent way to go to help fund this issue that we have. And they both agreed that the bond measure should probably not be done this year, or this next election. Maybe you can put it off. As far as funding or defunding NCIP this year, the fire chief left, but I'm sure he was hoping that NCIP is going to vote to finish refurbishment of the fire station. NCIP is always $800,000 to $1 million for forest management. We don't need another conflagration coming up. So all that money needs to be there. So when you talk about defunding, think about some of the city projects and some of the safety issue projects. Hopefully you've all looked at all the projects that we have and kind of make a determination, if you really are going to defund it, what would that number be? So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Uwe from New Monterey. I have two items I want to just bring to your attention. First is about staff you're about to hire and from here on forward, and then about their retirement health coverage. Under CalPERS, retired city employees remain eligible for health benefits. The private sector doesn't have that, as far as I know. The city is required by law to contribute the minimum employee health premium, currently $157 per month for a retiree in 2025. But beyond that minimum, the city is not required to pay more. I asked council to confirm that no additional amounts above this minimum is being paid today and from here on forward. Other cities have already reduced and eliminated additional subsidies for new employees while still honoring commitments for current staff. The second item is the parking revenues, and I'm really talking about the wharf parking, and you can include the parking garages with it. Right now, Monterey Wharf parking is $1.75 an hour or $12 maximum per day, compared to Santa Cruz, which has a $3 an hour and 24 daily maximum, or almost twice as much as Monterey. Locals with annual passes should not be impacted, but tourist rates can be adjusted. If we merge the parking fund into the general fund and raise tourist fees by 50%, the city could generate millions of additional revenues. I urge staff to calculate exactly what that number would be given last year's parking revenues. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name's Shay, and I am the chairman for the General Employees of Monterey. A couple things I wanted to point out with one of the statistics I found interesting. It was the 84, 85 thing. It listed the amount of employees, and it was streets was like a 5.4 or something. I would like to know the statistics for all those departments, police, fire, management. Let's see if all those have kept with that same pattern. I think it's worth asking a question. In terms of the attrition and the elimination of the vacant positions, that's nothing new. We've always had large numbers of positions that have been vacant, and it's a little frustrating that it's admitted to now, because typically it turns into a budget surplus every time every other year. So I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that those positions are always there, and they always turn to a budget surplus at some point. And then lastly, contracting things out. I'm not sure how contracting things out is presented and how it's executed, because, currently last time I think I spoke was in regards to having all of our fire maintenance contracted out, and there was a company that was doing it without a meet and confer process through the general employees. Well, we thought we settled that issue, but currently you guys aren't doing any in-house fire mechanic. It's all being contracted out again. So I'm not sure where the cost savings is when you have people standing by in mechanical who are certified to do the work and you're simply contracting it out. It doesn't make any financial sense. You're paying the people anyway. Might as well have them do the job. And I don't have faith in that contracting issue, or excuse me, that contracting process. It seems to me that if you're going to contract it out, it should go to the employees first, because if they're standing there waiting for the work, or if they're certified to do it, it should be done in-house. That's it. Thank you.
Kevin Dayton, Government Affairs Liaison for the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. First, the chamber wants to praise the mayor, city council, and staff because you're being fiscally responsible and addressing the structural budget deficit now before it becomes an emergency. So the chamber has a long-standing policy manual that it used when it considered positions on past tax measures that were proposed here, such as the transient occupancy tax increase in November 2020 and the sales tax increase, Measure G, in March 2020. And here's what it says. The chamber understands the importance of maintaining the balance between a viable economic climate for local business and public agencies' reliance on tax revenue. The policy manual also says this: the chamber does not support new or increased taxes, assessments, or fees that negatively affect the business environment unless there is a reasonable long-term benefit to the business community. So what does this mean in practice? Well, I think some chamber members, when interpreting this statement, are going to ask about the potential of whittling down some of the budget deficit through economic growth, encouraging creation of new businesses and expansion of existing businesses. And I think some of them are going to point to, for example, a very obvious one, the North Fremont Street business corridor. What a lot of potential there. You could get some tax revenue by turning some of those boarded up buildings and vacant parcels into places that people want to visit and spend money at. So please think about this as you proceed with your decision making. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll go to our callers on Zoom.
And our first speaker is Tom.
Thank you. Keep this brief. I noticed that Wharf 2 hasn't been part of the discussion. Was that intentional? I know it's in the Tidelands, but you also brought up Tidelands leases, so I'm just curious about that. Vacancy tax. I'm generally in favor of that, but I recently have experienced what I think is probably an unintended consequence. As many of you know, we have a junior accessory dwelling unit in our house, which is being used by my wife and myself. And I don't want that to be construed as a vacant unit, because it's not. It's she and I live in this house and we use this room like another part of the house. When it comes to the NCIP, I think I heard Hans say that there'd be projects that could be de-appropriate and that money go into the general fund. I'm curious about that, because I believe the way the charter reads is that the money stays in the NIP fund. It doesn't go back into the general fund. With regard to parking revenue increases, I see this as being a really good idea, and an idea that should be delicately managed. And in my written comments to you, I pointed out that in the Cannery Row area in particular, I think that's where we should concentrate on this, because that would discourage people from parking in the Lighthouse Cannery Row area and thus encourage them to park on the other side of the tunnel. So it would have a beneficial impact on traffic and congestion in this part of the city, and it would raise revenue rather than just blanket the entire city with one sort of a tax or a charge, whatever you want to call it. The first responder fee, I'm curious about that, because it seems like it could be more than what's being said. But anyhow, thank you very much.
Next speaker is Lori.
Good evening, everyone, Mayor and council members. You'll find my letter in the comments folder and hopefully your email before this, and look forward to next week as well. Thanks for giving the community a voice in this important discussion, and thank you for the color-coded cards. They make a very complex issue easier to follow. So thanks, staff, for doing that. I want to begin with what I don't support, and that is raiding or defunding the NCIP. Whether reallocating funds, using them as collateral, or canceling projects, it just breaks the faith with the voters who dedicated these dollars for neighborhoods. For me, that's a hard no. And I agree with Dennis, who spoke earlier. The community loves this unique program, and a lot of good projects in 4 decades have been completed from it, including in my neighborhood, undergrounding, which I'm very appreciative of. So this must remain intact. I'm also opposed to risky charter amendments like the VAF proposal. I see that as a poison pill that could loosen zoning restrictions and weaken community control. And one-time gimmicks like selling off city property, we really want to think about that, because I see that as the equivalent of selling your house to buy groceries. They don't solve a structural problem and only make future years harder. Now, what I do support are trimming the fat, definitely reducing the vacant staff positions, or pausing or shifting the non-core programs that nonprofits could provide more efficiently. Second, definitely the pilot program, as you'll see by my letter and my chart that I delivered, the aquarium and some of those big money places. And I'd really, for next week, I have a question, because I don't really fully comprehend why the aquarium, Montage, and all the others are kind of off limits and have the sweetheart deals that others don't. So if you could help others like myself in the meeting next week understand that better, I would really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
And our last speaker is Esther.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to thank staff for this presentation. It was really easy to follow and understand, and it's not an easy subject to have to swallow, so they made it a little bit more understandable to the average resident, I think. I also wanted to point out that the funds that we do have set aside are a credit to the mayor that we have now, because I think it's something like 34 million that wouldn't even be there if he hadn't started pushing for that a couple of years ago. So I wanted to clarify the property taxes that homeowners pay. The huge bulk of it goes to the county. So if we increase it here in our city, does it stay here, or how much does the county get on it? I don't know if there's a way to separate those two. So I'm curious to get an answer to that. As far as something that will be a big amount of money that will help, I think this deal that Montage has, considering that, you know, if you look at what their board of directors are paid and that it's supposedly a nonprofit, I don't see why they should get on top of, you know, whatever they are making and getting, you know, a giant amount of money that would help our budget deficit, and it would be a big dent. And lastly, you know, we can't attract new businesses here because we don't have housing. So, you know, and North Fremont, it's private property, so the city can't tell them what to do with it. But ideally, if we do have some new housing, we could diversify our portfolio of businesses and things and not have to rely so heavily on just taxes and tourism. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And I'm going to ask Clementine to keep the timer up if we can, because I'm going to give council 2 minutes each. We're going to go a little over 6 o'clock. So council gets 2 minutes each, and we're going to go ahead and close it out, and we'll pick the conversation back up next week. So who wants to start us off? You're good? Okay, you're good?
No, I've got a question.
Please.
Okay. Question related to adjusting the rent in the aquarium. I would like to know more about that in terms of the timing. When is the agreement expire? And are we obligated in any statutorial negotiation processes? Because the list says city council approval required. So I'd like to know about the timeline of that, because I'm very interested in adjusting that. Question on the admissions tax. If there is an admissions tax that is passed, if that was something that this council wanted to do and the voters approved of that, and let me just say it's a 2.5%, and it includes all those that are listed here. Does that conflict with the Tidelands agreement for the aquarium? Because would that potentially put us in a conflict where the money collected from the aquarium would wind up going to the Tidelands anyway? Or is that a question of how we write the ballot measure so that we could prevail in a admissions tax, or do we come in conflict with the Tidelands because the aquarium is in the Tidelands? So those are some areas that I need some clarity on next week. And then also we talked about the charter amendments for VAF. I would like to know more on specific properties, or a little bit more in terms of understanding exactly what staff's thinking is on any VAF adjustment. And how are we doing on my 2 minutes?
You have 15 seconds. Anything you want to share with the public? Because you can
And I'm going to share, thank you to the public for the emails, the phone calls, and the information to help support us in the process. Thank you very much for you being engaged. Stand by, no decisions tonight, and those are coming. Continue to engage yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Smith. Who wants to go next? You're good? Councilmember.
I wanted to thank the staff too. This is the perfect use of a special session. Is well noticed. We knew it was coming. People are here. We aren't making decisions. We're going to continue to think. We're going to continue to take feedback. This is perfect. So continue to dialogue with us. I was really interested that the parking, increasing the parking fees seems to be exciting. It's probably not a lot of money, but I think we should look at that. I also caution any possible intrusions on NCIP. It's it's very illusory to think there's any savings when more than 50% of NCIP projects are maintenance. I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to take back the $3 million that we are doing for the fire stations. Any defunding of any projects should be decided by NCIP. It takes years to do these projects. Any decision to stop the project really should be punted back to NCIP for them to oversee it. It's very painful. It was exceedingly painful when all the projects were pulled, then put back on, and then some of them made it each year. It's very, it's so stressful on the, especially the reps, to walk these projects through, the proponents, and get them going, and then have the intrusion from even the council. NCIP can figure this out. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Resch. I'll close this out. As a precursor for where I'm at going into next week for everybody, to me, all cards, figuratively speaking, are on the table. So to me, when staff comes to the council and says we need to have a yes, maybe, and a no pile, to me, nothing is in the no pile. I want to look at yes, maybe, and the maybe to me means how can we shift something in a way to make it work better. But the problems that we're facing are significant, and how it's being presented to us here is talking about a $10 million structural deficit, but we can't look at it from just that narrow perspective, because as a couple of folks brought up in public comments, there are things that aren't even being considered as it relates to the funding needs that exist within the city of Monterey. So we have the over $300 million capital improvement plan. We have the potential for adding a new fire station to cover the Highway 68 corridor. We have updating our library. We have Wharf 2, which was brought up during public comment. We have the deferred maintenance of our city's parking garages. We have city taking over. There's been this idea of the city taking over managing and maintaining our sidewalks in the city as opposed to the adjacent property owner. All these ideas are coming out that cost money. And so I appreciate Hans starting us off here by saying we need to look at least the 10 million, but it should go beyond there. And I appreciate the fact that we're looking at revenues and expenditures. I think one thing that I'm excited about is the onboarding of our economic development manager, and that helping to potentially live within our means and find ways of helping to support folks that either want to start a business or are already currently in business. So I really look forward to this conversation next week. This is probably one of the, I got the alarm. This is probably one of the highest turnout study sessions that we've had, at least in a while. So I appreciate everybody's engagement on this. And I look forward to the continued discussion. Hopefully you all can attend our meeting next week. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody.